Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lordan. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Coming off a week of news articles kicking around about how the U.S. has the worst homicide clearance rates of basically any developed country in the world, I had someone send a message asking about a particular crime and saying, John, why haven't I heard anything about this case since it happened? And I went looking, and it's a really good question. Today, we are trying to figure out what's going on with the case of Vanessa Ceja Ramirez. It's a story troubling from every aspect and really plays on some fears that a lot of women have about doing something simple like going for a walk in a park. Let's go ahead and learn much more about this and see if we can try to figure out why we haven't heard anything about this case. There was a big run of media basically right around the time where it happened. There's been 2 articles since, and it happened back in 2020. Let's start by learning where this takes place. This is in Cook County, Illinois. Cook County is the most populous county in the U.S. state of Illinois. More than 40% of all residents of Illinois live within Cook County. As of 2020, the population was over 5.2 million. Huge. It's the county seat of Cook County is Chicago. So that'll give you some idea about that giant population out there. Land use in Cook County is mostly urban and densely populated. And in that is a lot of parks. There was a park system basically put into place once they started seeing how this area was coming together. And it's a way for people to get outdoors. It's a way for those parks to be there as resources for all the citizens. And this is a picture. Actually, I've got another picture here also of Vanessa on a Facebook post coming from the Midlothian, Illinois Police Department. I know anyone in this true crime area, as soon as you hear Midlothian, you start thinking Texas because of the Missy Beavers case. Midlothian, Illinois, November 3rd, 2020. Anyone with information about missing person Vanessa Ceja is asked to call the Cook County Sheriff's Department or the Midlothian Police Department, and they give numbers. Of course, this case is in a different place now, so if you do have information on it, we'll have the contact details that you need in the description box down below. But we could see in this post that it's a social media post, and it's from her mother saying, "Please help me find my daughter." She was last seen Monday, November 2nd at Bremen Forest Preserve at 4 p.m. Now, one of the things that's a little confusing about this case is there's 2 of these forest preserves that are kind of close to each other. And for some reason, a bunch of the media and even one of the official statements from one of the law enforcement agencies is saying that it's a different one, that it's Midlothian Park. Now, that one's kind of connected to Bremen Forest Preserve, as we'll see here. But it does leave some question in terms of, I don't know what the starting point for their walk was. If we take this at face value, this is her mother saying that she was probably one of the last people to see her at Bremen Forest Preserve at 4 p.m. So it seems to me like that's the place where Vanessa essentially tells them she isn't feeling well or she doesn't feel like completing the walk that they're doing. They're doing this before they're going to church that night, apparently. And Vanessa just wants to head back to the car and wait. And from the reports I'm seeing, that was only about 20 minutes into the walk. If they were walking, and that's another thing that's varying. I'm seeing some descriptions say they were jogging. Others say that they were walking. There is 3 people in total. There's Vanessa, her mother, and a friend. And Vanessa leaves the other 2. If it is walking, 20-minute walk, it means Vanessa went about a mile, stopped, turned around, and decided she was going to go back to the car. Seems like a pretty close distance, but apparently something happens on that walk back to the car. Let's go ahead and continue with the articles here at the Sun. According to authorities, Ceja Ramirez was separated from her mother and the friend after she told them she was tired and would meet them back at the car. When the mother finished jogging, Ceja Ramirez was nowhere to be found. The worried mother called police after finding some of her daughter's clothing on the ground. but not her. That had to be absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine that. Authorities said they searched the forest preserve by air and used trained dogs on Monday, but the 22-year-old was not located. Apparently, they brought some dogs out. The dogs did detect a scent for her, followed that for a while, and then somehow they lost the scent. They couldn't track her any farther. Let's try to figure out these locations a little bit. So I'm not finding a Bremen forest preserve like her mother stated in the post. When I do a search on that, it does come back to an area called Bremen Grove, which I believe is probably the right area because that is very close to Midlothian Meadows, which we're going to learn is where Vanessa's body is found. But just taking a look here, we can see Bremen Grove is in this area here. There is a golf course kind of between the two, but there's also a whole trail system that runs through all this. And I believe that there's trail linkage that could get you from one side of this to the other. So it's a bit confusing because, like I said, a bunch of the press is going to say that they went walking at Midlothian Meadows and then her body was found at Midlothian Meadows. Midlothian Meadows does have a walking trail, but it's basically just a hoop. And it's about 3 miles. It's a 3-mile hoop. And the strange thing about that is if she would have gone walking 20 minutes on a 3-mile hoop, I mean, yeah, if she turned around at that point, she would have saved maybe up to a mile. But because of the layout of it, with it being a big hoop, she was almost at the halfway point. So it kind of wouldn't have saved her a ton of time for her to say, well, I'm going to turn around. I don't want to finish this now. So it seems to me that it's more likely they were doing a longer jog or walk. It's just hard to kind of make sense out of all this. Learning a little bit more about Midlothian Meadows Trail. In the Midlothian Meadows Forest Preserve, which stretches from 152nd Street to 159th and Pulaski Road, there is a 3.1-mile hiking trail through the woodlands, which connects by a footpath to other trails in the Tinley Creek Division of the Cook County Forest Preserve District. So just kind of recapping what we had said there. Let's see if we can get some more details. Community members gathered to search for Ramirez Wednesday afternoon. Resident Kelly Rapp posted in a Midlothian Facebook group asking volunteers to meet at the Forest Preserve entrance at 12:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Always really touches me when citizens step forward to help in this way. I don't know her personally, but when I heard, I couldn't believe there wasn't a search party yet, Rapp told Patch.com. I wanted to get involved because I pray that if this ever happened to one of my children, the community would come together to help as well. From what I understand, a bunch of volunteers were gathering there, and I believe I don't know if they were part of the official search or if they were part of one of the volunteer search groups, but there was a group of 30, according to one of the reports on this, and they made the discovery of Vanessa's body. There was, I think, another group that was getting ready, and essentially police came over and waved them off and just said, nope, no one's coming in now. And they kind of locked the scene down from that point. And unfortunately, we would see the news: missing woman found in Midlothian Area Forest Preserve, was strangled. Ceja Ramirez's loved ones gathered Wednesday night for a vigil where they remembered her as a college student who was the light of her family and community. Not only was she attending college, she was a teacher's aide in a local elementary school as well. Also, some reports are saying this is someone that was deeply religious and just looking forward to a future of helping children achieve their dreams. She's just somebody that we believed in, that had our future in her hands, just like most of our kids here, said Alejandro Villegas, her uncle. She was a sweet child that was humble, smiled, shy. She was a good person, and she just didn't deserve anything of this. Harvey Mayor Christopher Clark urged the public to come forward with any information they might have on what happened to Ceja Ramirez. So as we can see, details are pretty tight. There are some activists that get involved that are assisting the family here. Also, raising funds to get a reward together. And some information is going to come out through them that gives us a bit more detail. But jumping over to heavy.com, we get a little more information. She was a teacher's aide, college student. She went on a walk in the woods with her mother and a friend. And unfortunately, she wouldn't come home that day. We have a statement from the Cook County Sheriff's Office here. Ceja Ramirez was reported missing on Monday afternoon after she disappeared from the Midlothian Meadows Forest Preserve. Cook County Forest Preserve District Police, with assistance from the Sheriff's Office and other law enforcement agencies, searched the Forest Preserve on Monday evening. A Sheriff's Police Canine unit was able to detect a scent trail, but the trail dissipated and the search was unsuccessful. Cook County Forest Preserve Police continued their missing persons investigation until Wednesday afternoon, when the body of Ceja Ramirez was discovered in a wooded area at the Midlothian Meadows Forest Preserve. At that point, Sheriff's Police opened a death investigation at the request of Cook County Forest Preserve Police. Now, interesting to note here, it looks like there is a police force basically for the preserve, Cook County Forest Preserve Police. Some of the comments that I'm seeing around this, I've been reading all about it over on Web Sleuths as well, is that yes, there are official police, but there are also volunteers that are weaved into that. And the police presence in the parks isn't always necessarily the strongest. It's not like, it's not like you can imagine a bunch of beat cops in a downtown area where, you might be able to scream and call for help. And as we're going to see when we kind of take a look at this forest here, there's some thick brush. I mean, the trail that you'd walk on is all paved, but as soon as you get off of that, I mean, there's a lot of foliage and greens there. Here is a map from the Forest Preserves of Cook County website, and this is the actual area. From what I understand, I believe her body was found kind of close to this northern tip in the triangle here. And this blue line it's a bit of a connector between these different reserves, or preserves. So I'm not sure. That's where I have this question about. I don't know where they parked. According to some people I'm seeing on Web Sleuths and coverage that they have seen about the case, which has unfortunately since been pulled down. There was a couple of Facebook posts that were done by these activists that are assisting. In those posts, they were saying that it was very clear that they were at the parking lot where the mother was, and that was actually over in this other park on this side, which could make sense. Like, if you are going for a long walk or a jog of some kind, park at one of these locations, hit that long part of the trail, and then that you're going to hit this hoop that's basically going to bring you back to the same trail and then bring you home. And this kind of connector, you could see right here. So it's not really an area where it would be very easy to get lost, I guess, unless you there really is no way, because both these connectors actually meet back up on the same piece of trail here. But as you can see what I'm talking about, the brush is thick. It's really, really thick out here. And we're going to learn that this area it's a place where teenagers hang out. It's also a place that has a bit of a homeless population. Actually, let's go ahead and get some comments. This is from a user over on Reddit named Boo99Boo. So I grew up near Midlothian. I'm familiar with the area. Midlothian is not the best area. It's been slowly declining since at least the 90s. I'm seeing some other comments kind of to that effect as well, because of some of the details that we're going to learn about the condition of her body. Some people are wondering if there was more than one person that was involved in this. We've got other people that are theorizing maybe this is some type of gang activity or something along those lines. Forest preserves in the Chicago area, and more so in Cook County where this happened, are somewhat of a novel thing compared to other metropolitan areas. I take my dog to a local dog-friendly one all the time. I take my kids to explore on the weekends sometimes. They're generally safe, and they do actually have their own police who generally write tickets and lock gates at dusk. You do see minor drug activity, users meeting dealers, nothing dangerous, and there can be homeless people living in them. This particular one is very close to a highway exit off of I-57 and I-294, which makes it even more likely there's a homeless population. And I've seen several other comments that are basically confirming that there is a homeless population at this particular location. But let's continue with the details here. An autopsy determined that Vanessa Ceja Ramirez, 22, died of asphyxiation due to a ligature strangulation. The Harvey woman's death was ruled a homicide. Of course, just touching on the statistics about murders of this nature, we know that when it comes to women being murdered, in like 75, 76% of the cases, it's by someone they know. Conditions like we're seeing here, not 100% sure that that's what's going on here. Is it possible that she was going back to the car? She had her cell phone. She told someone, hey, I'm going to go hang out at the car. Come meet me there. Maybe. We also know, because this is a forest preserve that is right in the city, like she could have bounced out to a street. Maybe she thought there was a shortcut back to the car. There's a lot of potential for different routes and different things that could have happened in that. Considering that her mother finds her clothing in the preserve, it seems like she probably, I would imagine, especially seeing the trail layout there, I think she just would have turned around and stuck on the trail. So it seems like something possibly happened there. But let's try to keep an open mind as we process all this, because here we are a couple of years later, no solve on this case. And this is one of those cases that law enforcement is playing extremely close to the vest, almost to the point where I'm wondering, like, is this, like, could it be helped if we would open up with some information and kind of put it out in the community and ask for some more assistance on this? The Harvey woman's death was ruled a homicide. Let's get over to dailymail.com. Another thing that the medical examiner described was that the victim's death was beyond gruesome. And we don't have their words to exactly understand that, but we will get some insight from these activists. The woman's partially burned body was discovered by a group of volunteers. Quote, she was beaten, partially burned, and someone intercepted her and possibly pulled her into a wooded area and basically tortured her, community activist Andrew Holmes told Fox 32. It just pulls my mind in all kinds of different directions, wondering how much premeditation could happen with something like this. Doesn't seem like it, unless we're missing some part of the story, like, yeah, she did make contact with someone and we know that someone was going to meet up with her or something like that. So probably not that premeditated, but the thing about her body being burned is troubling, because we are mostly water. How easy is it to actually burn a body, and what is the purpose of doing that? I did see a comment from one. There's two activists primarily, and I'm not sure if it was Holmes or the other one, he's Montez, I believe, who said this, but I saw a video interview with one of them, and he was almost alluding to that the burning was done to try to cover up part of the crime, maybe to obscure DNA evidence. So we're talking a situation with a sexual assault and possibly the evidence that would be left behind there being burned so that it couldn't be identified. And with a sexual assault component seemingly being part of this case, it's very surprising that we don't have a solve. We know how easy it is nowadays to use genetic genealogy to get a DNA profile, at least figure out, a family, at least get a sense of direction from that, even if we can't get it down to a one-to-one match. But we're, in many of these cases, getting matches right off the bat. I don't know. It raises a lot of questions when you're talking about a case that, by the initial description, sounds like it should be solved by now, and it isn't for some reason. Let's continue with the details. Police scoured a 2-square-mile area in the forest in search of the missing woman with helicopters and canine dogs. The animals picked up Ceja Ramirez's scent at 151st and Pulaski Avenue. So just kind of jumping back to our map real quick. Basically, and this is kind of an interesting question too, Pulaski is here and 151st is here. So where the dogs get the scent, I believe, is relatively close to where she is ultimately found. So that also raises a question. Was she removed from this area for a period of time and then brought back here? And while that might not seem logical considering that her mom finds her clothing out here, we're going to get some other information that might actually support that. But let's continue. So not only did her dogs pick up her scent there, but they got her cell phone's last ping. Now, after she went missing, her mother, of course, tried to call her cell phone and her cell phone was off. But there is other ping information that they were able to get. And based on that information, police searched an apartment building located 2 miles away in Oak Forest, but they failed to find any clues there. I believe they also searched a school. And based on what I've heard about this area, I think there's a high school that is close. Yeah, Bremen Community High School right here. Extremely close to the cell phone ping and where the dogs hid. I don't know if that school was in session. We're talking 2020 at this point, so I'm not sure if school was active, but we do have this high school in that area. As for the other ping, that was at a apartment building called Manchester Court Apartments, and we can see that's a ways off. Now, if we kind of take this theory that maybe her mom actually parked in this other park somewhere around this golf course, if she did hop up into the streets, maybe she could have been picked up. Maybe someone took her from the street and then she was taken out to that location. I don't know, but it seems like they get another ping out here. Another theory on that is, what if someone found her cell phone, they turned it on, for some reason turned it back off? The thing about that theory that doesn't work for me is if someone found her cell phone and turned it on and figured out, oh, this is that missing girl, why wouldn't they have called it in and said, hey, I found this is where I found it? Or if they didn't even realize that, they just turned it on, they're like, oh, it's a working cell phone, why would they turn it off? Why wouldn't they try to use it? Why wouldn't they try to sell it? Why wouldn't it hit the network again? Or was it taken as a trophy? Did the person that actually committed this crime take the cell phone, turn it on for some reason, shut it off, and it hasn't been back on again? Another potential theory that I've seen on that was that where the phone was disposed of? Did they turn it on, essentially kind of throw off police, go drop it in a trash can at this apartment building, and then know that, police would be there searching instead of looking in the right place? So a lot of different theories on the cell phone pings. Her scorched body was later discovered at the Midlothian Meadows Forest Preserve. Let's continue at Chicago Sun-Times and learn about these activists that have been helping on this case, putting in substantial amounts of money to get that reward up, and also sharing some details about what's going on with this. Community activist Raul Montes Jr. said Ceja Ramirez's violent death was unfathomable as he spoke to reporters just steps from where her body was found in the Midlothian Meadows Forest Preserve. Quote, according to police and authorities, it's presumed that there is foul play. This has caused a lot of anxiety and panic throughout this area. Who would have the heart to do this to this innocent woman that was walking through this forest preserve? Andrew Holmes, a community activist who put up initial reward money on this, I think he put in the first $2,000, and then I think Montez added $2,000 more. They started raising funds and getting more. I do know her hands were bound, she was beaten and strangled. However, Cook County officials haven't confirmed many of those details. WGN-TV reports that friends and family are searching for answers. The Cook County sheriffs really don't have much to comment on. They basically say there's few leads in the case as they're investigating it. And the day after the discovery on Thursday, her family and friends gathered at the same spot to keep her memory alive in hopes of finding someone who knows something. This is also noting about the phone ping, that it did ping in nearby Oak Forest, which could produce some leads. Continuing at Inside Edition, this is really, for the time where this happened, this is about the only comment that we get from law enforcement. Matt Wahlberg, Deputy Press Secretary for Cook County Sheriffs, told Inside Edition Digital, the investigation is ongoing, but so far there have been no new developments on the case at this time. No suspects or persons of interest have been identified in connection with her death. And that's about all we hear from law enforcement on this case at that time. It's one of those cases where they're really, in my opinion, they're not engaging the public for help directly, which could mean one of a few things. It could mean that they've got a good beat on what's going on with this case. They've already got their investigative avenues kind of locked down, and they're heading in that direction and they're just not able to close the gap for a prosecution for some reason. Or on the flip side, I don't know, maybe they don't want to put this in the public. They're trying to make this story go away. I mean, honestly, outside of 2 articles, there's nothing else except for this initial run of articles that we've just looked at. There's 2 articles which are basically follow-ups with the family. And that's it. Like, really, law enforcement doing very little with the press to try to move this case forward. There might be a really solid reason for it. I don't want to discount that possibility, but Carolina Abrams shared a message to her cousin's killer. You are a coward, a lowlife, and truly are the scum of the earth for what you've done. You have no place in society. Vanessa Ceja Ramirez did not deserve any of what happened to her. Vanessa was kind, loving, a precious soul, loved her family and friends. This is one of those articles. So 4 months later, her family and loved ones returned to the scene of the crime for another vigil. Once again, they're trying to find that right person. They're looking for someone that has information and asking them to come forward. Vanessa was a beautiful person. She enjoyed life. She loved going to the store, restaurants, visiting family, said Carolina Abrams again. At this point, the reward was raised to $15,000. I don't know if it's gotten higher than that at this point. I believe that's the highest amount that I've seen. Man. And the activists also have some strong comments. Raul Montes Jr. says, right now, this case is inconclusive. It's a mystery. It's unfathomable. Who would have the heart to do this? This is reprehensible, heinous, and blatant evil. They also, at this point, are asking for the FBI to intervene. Right now, time is a factor, Montes said. We hope that somebody will come forth. The family just wants closure. And they want to make sure to bring this person to justice, whoever did this. Why do they want the FBI to intervene? They believe that the FBI would have better access to phone records and social media accounts, which could help with the case. Honestly, I think it could help with the case if there's any question of, did she reach out to someone? Did she contact someone? You know, maybe after she left her mother, she did cut right to the street and she thought that there was a friend nearby that could give her a ride or pick her up or something along those lines. There might be some aspect to that going on here. Montes and activist Bill Morton are also appealing to Cook County and the state to have more surveillance cameras in forest preserves. Morton said this isn't the first time and won't be the last time that we hear of somebody sexually assaulted, abducted, or brutally murdered, or finding a body in the woods. This is not right. He said the issue is larger than what's happening in Midlothian, but that Vanessa remains their focus. This is for justice, he said. This is for closure for the family of Vanessa and the public in general, those that use these woods, those in this community, those of this county, and those at Bremen High School across the street. We want to solve this and bring closure to the family. That's the most important thing. I think the cameras are a good suggestion. I think there's some challenges with that. I took a look at the street level and the park isn't really closed off from the streets at any point that I can see. You could basically just walk through the woods and cut right on out onto a street. There's no fence anywhere. Just thinking about the logistics of getting cameras set up like that, I would think it'd be important to cover all the entry and exit points, all the parking lots. I mean, that seems logical and makes sense, but for an area where you've got brush that thick, I don't think it's reasonable to think that you could have camera coverage of all that, outside of like some satellite view type device or something like that. I don't know how you can, and even then, like the tree coverage is very thick in some places. Outside of all that, there is a little connection that is made. I think it was made by heavy.com, pointing to a CBS News article about some other murders that are happening in this same area and kind of wondering if they're all connected. Let's take a look at that article real quick. I don't know that it's connected to this case, but I do think it's worth touching on. CBS News reports, is there a serial killer on the loose in Chicago? Some have been raped, others were beaten. Dozens of cases of women who were all strangled or asphyxiated remain unsolved. I went looking for stats on that as well. And based on some murder statistics I was looking at, it was for 2011. The number of strangulations and asphyxiations is approximately like 1.2% of the total murders, which I was kind of surprised by. I expected to see that number be quite a bit higher, but of course, guns are the number one when it comes to those stats. I was surprised to see it so low. So it's interesting when you start seeing that there's a trend of that being used as a type of death, knowing that it's only happening in 1% of those cases. If you do see a cluster of those happening somewhere, maybe you do have something going on, like potentially a serial killer. And we'll see with this article, there's more reasons for them to think that. I don't think, I mean, who knows? There's a possibility Vanessa's case is connected to this, but I'm not feeling very strongly about it. CBS 2 investigator Pam Zeekman reports that questions are being raised about whether a serial killer may be on the loose in Chicago. Since 2001, their bodies have been found in vacant lots, abandoned buildings, and alleys. No talks about parks in that one. Some were dumped in garbage cans, and some even set on fire, all of them strangled. So being set on fire and being strangled, we have a few strong conditions lining up there. What doesn't line up strongly, most of these victims are sex workers or drug addicts. And we know in Vanessa's case, that's certainly not the case. The two investigators asked the Murder Accountability Project to review more than 50 unsolved strangulation and asphyxiation cases dating back to 2001. The group, known as MAP, has a knack for finding patterns in unsolved murder cases using a computer algorithm. It's essentially a serial killer detector, and for many years our algorithm has been signaling red alert about a series of strangulations in Chicago, said Director Thomas Hargrove. Now, they apparently did identify a serial killer in Gary, Indiana, someone that was later found and actually admitted to, I believe, 6 or 7 different murders. So this system does work. You guys know me. I try to not create boogeymen out of these situations. I think these situations are terrible and terrifying enough without trying to wrap this into, hey, there's one person out there that's responsible for all this. But this type of data, the way that it's being presented here, is actually pretty compelling. You can see a map they've got here, and they've actually done it in a way where you can toggle these options on and off. So if we're not counting any of the discoveries where bodies were found indoors, we could hit exclude on that. It'll go ahead and drop that out. And we can see, I mean, over the course of 17 years here, this is pretty considerable. Now, keep in mind the stats that we started this episode with. We've got over 5.2 million people living in this area. So, a murder map is going to have a lot of dots on it. It just is. But this has already been kind of broken down to these specific conditions that we've talked about here. Hargrove said there is a pattern to who's doing the dying. Disproportionately, these women have a history of sex work and a history of illegal drugs. So again, I don't feel super strong about it being connected to this. But who knows? I mean, I can tell you part of the conversation online around this is, what if this is some type of serial killer? What if the MO is changing because this is someone that was just in the park, saw the opportunity, took advantage of it, or they're becoming more confident and now the MO is starting to change a bit. I don't know. But for that particular park, there actually is an instance from back in 2016. There is a woman that NBC Chicago here got in contact with. Of course, she wanted to keep her identity private, but she did say she was attacked in that park. Basically, she was walking. Someone came up from behind her, grabbed her around the neck, dragged her into the forest, started choking her. Thankfully, she kicked them and they went running off, and she kicked them in the sensitive place. I mean, if you guys are wondering, yes, and she was worried. She said she was starting to see the world start turning black, and she was starting to think, this is it. This is the end. And it was her only shot. So thankfully, she did get out of that situation and survive it. But if anything, just another data point for maybe the cameras are a good thing. Maybe there could be some type of increase in the reserve or the preserve police that work that area. So there is one more article on this case. It came out November 3rd, 2021, and I haven't seen any other articles. I went looking all through the Web Sleuths thread. There's been a couple of different Reddit threads that kind of pop up talking about this case, but for official press coverage, this is really the last of it, and this is at the 1-year anniversary. Family of murdered 22-year-old speaks out a year after her death. I'm talking to you because I don't want people to forget what happened to Vanessa, said Carolina Abrams, her godmother. She deserves justice. She liked to dance, and at our family gatherings, for the most part, end up in some type of dancing, and Vanessa would be right there with us dancing, she said. She loved playing soccer. She was devoted to her church youth group. A couple of other new details come out in this article. On top of the cell phone ping at the apartment building, it's also bringing up the school. And I know I mentioned that previously. It's not telling us what school, but based on some of the other information that I had heard, I believe that they're thinking it's probably Bremen High School, because that's just about the exact location where they're saying they had a ping from her cell phone. Vanessa's body was found back at the Forest Preserve off the trail in the woods in an area known to teenagers as a place to party and start fires. That's another thing with this case is this is seemingly happening late afternoon. I mean, if her mom's original Facebook post says that she was last seen around 4 p.m. on November 2nd. So into early evening, late afternoon into early evening on a Monday, admittedly in the year of COVID. So maybe the street traffic wasn't going to be as thick. Maybe there wasn't going to be as many people out and about. Like I said, I don't know if the school was occupied at that time or not. But her body being found in an area that's known for high school students to go hang out and party at. I don't know. There's a lot of different cross sections I'm seeing here where I'm wondering, how did this person pull this off? Could it have really been one person? I'm thinking there's strong potential that there was more than one person here. And outside of her cell phone, obviously we know her cell phone's missing. This article also tells us there's something else missing too. The medical examiner's report indicated that she had been murdered, saying her body was partially burned. Her shoes were also missing. And finally, we do get a little bit of a comment from law enforcement. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart said, "We have multiple detectives working on the case actively, and I know myself personally, they've been running out recent leads, so this is an active case." Vanessa's family said they want people to know who they lost. A shy, caring young woman, deeply religious, who is about to devote her life to children. While their faith tells them Vanessa is at peace, they are not. Whoever did this is a monster, and I'm just concerned whoever did this has done it before or will do it again. Web Sleuths has a very good thread on this conversation. I'll have that in the link down below as usual. There was a fundraiser. It is currently closed. They were basically looking to raise funds for funeral costs for Vanessa. It looks like they did. They hit their goal with that. But we now have this family a few years after the fact that has lost a loved one. They're never going to get her back, and they're waiting for justice. And what's happening with this case, I can't tell you. It seems like media, they were sure to run with it hard and strong right around the instance of it happening. We do have NBC stepping up, giving the family a few opportunities to kind of renew public interest after that. And it's just been radio silent ever since. What do you think is going on with this case? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. And if anything, let's please keep this family in our thoughts, in our hearts, and see if there's something we can learn from this experience and bring into our personal lives so that we're not facing the same types of tragedies for ourselves. I think that's just a very small way that each of us individually can honor Vanessa. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. I hope you guys have a nice weekend and enjoy the holiday on Monday. We'll see you again next week. on the LordanArts channel.